if I've got two boards sitting at the front door, four-wheel drive or my rear-wheel drive, whatever it is, I'll go to the rear-wheel drive any day of the week.
Welcome back to another episode of the eSKATE Chat podcast. We're here with Jeff and Nick. Nick's a new face to the podcast, but definitely not to the channel. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you do here?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Evolve for a bit over 5 years now, and more recently working as the technical manager with a lot of involvement in R&D. A good bit of fun.
Yeah, nice. What we're going to be doing on this episode is taking a look at some eSKATE myths. I've gone through all the groups and I've talked to a couple of the writers in the community to see if there's any things that people talk about a lot that actually aren't true and have conversations around them.
Okay.
Let's just jump straight into it. This is one I saw the other day in a group, and it wasn't even someone talking. Someone had literally made an infographic where they were explaining some stuff. So they put it into a graphic as fact, and it's not exactly fact. It was smaller wheels increase your range.
Yeah, it's always a questionable one. It is something we see pop up from time to time. It kind of like circulates around, and it is one of those things. I guess there's a lot of misinformation around in how people perceive what smaller wheels and bigger wheels do, and I think that there's probably too much reliance on the wheel diameter for people to achieve their range.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of variables when it comes to the gear sizing, and that affects everything. Like if you've got a smaller wheel and a larger gear, top speed's not going to be as much, but torque's going to be great. But then again, if you get a smaller gear down on it, it's increased top speed, but on the bottom end though, it's going to draw more current, more load.
Yeah, and it's like, I think the bigger players here are probably more so like, looking at your actual gearing and your wheel geometer, more so than just the diameter on its own. And people changing to a bigger or smaller wheel thinking it's going to get their range without looking at other factors are probably not going to get the results they want. And I think it's important to take that into account.
Yeah, and bigger wheel makes a huge difference too. When you look at the 97 or the 107, anything like that, it has just greater roll, greater speed.
Yeah.
But as soon as you put like a smaller gear on it, oh man, you don't get that torque straight up, and it makes the board work a lot harder. But if you get that gear ratio just right and you get it, just perfect, then, I believe that, you can get better results. But it just depends. There's other factors too, right away. What about, what's the weather like outside? Is it windy? As soon as you go into a breeze, man, it puts massive extra load on the product.
Well, I think from my experience, my best street board range tests have been using 97mm wheels instead of the 83s.
Which gear do you use?
32.
Okay.
So you're a lighter rider.
I am.
So it does make sense that a higher gearing might work better for you.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's definitely a lot to do with riding style, but then riding weight, the terrain. If you're doing a lot of hills, a high gearing's probably not going to be as good. So a smaller wheel might get you more range.
Yeah.
We see people asking this a lot, especially in relations to the 6 and 7 inch.
Yep.
There's quite a big difference in the actual gearing ratio there. So it's a good example. Do you want to run people through?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're looking at obviously wheel diameter, it's got to be looked at in the same light as, I guess, gearing, because it's changing that whole final drive ratio. And we can't look at it as like a gear ratio per se. But yeah, when we're looking at, the 7 inch with the 66T, that's a nice happy medium, mid-ground acceleration speed. And the 47 with the T with the 6 inch, that's quite a tall geared setup. So you're going to get more speed, but you're always going to use more power every time you want to get to that. Yeah. So if you were to put that on and you do a group ride where there's stopping and starting, you're definitely going to get less range. Alternatively, like, if you put that 66T with the 6 inch and you're doing a lot of stopping and starting, you're probably going to get more range than if you had the 7 inch with the gearing, because you've got better torque to get going each time.
And then on the flip side, if you were trying to maintain a top speed and not doing the stopping and starting, the results would be reversed.
Generally, yes.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's a lot to think about. So there's myth number 1 debunked. It's not necessarily a smaller wheel that's going to do it. Range is a multi-factor equation.
Everything needs to be looked at together.
Yeah, wicked.
For me, I like the 9738. or the 107 with the 38 tooth gear. I just like that little bit extra startup torque and slightly stronger braking feeling. And I think the top end speed is a good mix. I don't like always going full speed, but I like to have that, performance.
Don't we all?
Myth number 2. I think this one comes from the old school days of like lipos and stuff like that. There's a misconception. Some people think you shouldn't ride your board all the way to 0% because it damages the battery.
Yeah, that is another one we do see circling around from time to time. Does get pretty, popular topics on like eSKATE pages and those kind of forums. With production batteries and the BMSs we have in them, they're always programmed with these safety features around them.
What is a BMS?
Battery management system. So it will handle charging input, current output, and obviously, like cell management at the end of charging and things like that. So it's always going to have these protections built into it to sort of protect that from happening. And one of those is what we call LVC, or low voltage cutoff. And that's always programmed at a point where even in the bottom end of the battery, with load, we're not going to exceed the cell's safe low voltage cutoff.
I've got nothing else to add. That was pretty much bang on.
Pretty much sums it up. Well, let's go over some other battery health topics that we see pop up. What else do we see? We see like leaving it on charge, storing it at a certain capacity.
Yeah. So obviously, we do see the common, like, those questions always coming about. And, the BMS ultimately is there to help protect like the charging and the discharging. The BMS won't allow the battery to overcharge. Obviously, it's going to have that safety cutoff like it does with the low voltage cutoff. And obviously, charging comes down to the rider needing to get the battery at that certain point. So we recommend obviously 30 to 50% for storing for long periods. That is a pretty standard level for lithium batteries.
What would you call a long period though?
Typically more than a month. I'd say to store it around there.
So some people think that's in between their weekends.
No, it's not going to have too much of an effect, over a couple of days, because it's quite a relatively short period when you're looking at the whole expected cycle life of a battery. If they're leaving it at full charge or plugged into a charger for like months on end, that's when you'd start seeing probably like a deterioration.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on like leaving the board on charge overnight, or if, like, you step away and then it goes to green? And
yeah, it's not going to cause any negative effects, like doing it every now and then, or doing it for, I left it on charge for 12 hours or I fell asleep. It's not going to like kill the battery from that. But if you're doing that consistently and leaving it on charge for days and weeks on end, the BMS isn't going to like overcharge it, and it's not going to overcharge the cells. But you don't want to be leaving it up there all the time. It's basically just keeping the cells at full charge and they're not in their proper storage state.
The chargers are also programmed to only hit a certain voltage, so
correct.
The chargers can't go above that anyway.
Yeah.
Myth debunked, number 2. The next one's a bit of fun because we all have a bit of experience with this. It's our most viewed insider, actually, the 4-wheel drive boards. Yeah, it's by far the most viewed insider. Everyone loved it. We get people hitting us up still on that thing. Can I buy them? 4-wheel drive boards are better than 2-wheel drive boards. That's a statement. I've
got to say yes and no. And what I mean by that is I think the 4-wheel drive has a place, but it would certainly not be my go-to. Like, if I've got 2 boards sitting at the front door, 4-wheel drive or my rear-wheel drive, whatever it is, I'll go to the rear-wheel drive any day of the week. And especially because most of my riding is usually on footpath or road and little bits of grass. But however, if I was just going purely grass, 4-wheel drives are fantastic. It just is no better feeling than, feeling the front wheels like pull you as well as being pushed from the rear. And you get that extra traction when you're hooking in around corners, it just drives you through. You can probably go a little bit harder, whereas on the rear-wheel drive, that sort of spin out a little bit more on the grass. But as soon as you take those 4-wheel drives onto the footpath or road, no, the carve is just gone. The whole feeling of the carve, it just changes. You can really feel the front of the board being sort of pulled, and it's not natural. But on grass, it's totally natural. It's like a match made in heaven. So for me, I would be choosing two-wheel drive any day of the week. But the four-wheel drive, yeah, it's got great acceleration, that grip. But however, when you're on those like dirt roads, I still don't think they're that great on four-wheel drive because you still lose traction. No matter what, you're still going to slide, and the rear-wheel drive still does the same thing.
I did see some four-wheel drive tests on like a dirt incline, and they sort of concluded that on a skateboard, you can't actually get enough weight over the front to truly make use of that front drive. It probably helps a bit, but it's not like a rock crawler or something like that, where the front wheels really pull you up.
Yeah.
Naturally, you're over the back, lifts the front up, those wheels spin. And especially on mud, because grass it grips, but mud, 7-inch wheels. You said if you had a four-wheel drive board and a two-wheel drive, it's not an if, you do.
Good point. We got a few actually.
I'll chuck up some photos. We built 5 or 6 of them for the UK Open.
Well, let's talk about the first one though that we built. The first one,
when?
Yeah, it was back I think late 2016, and that was when after the GT had just been released. And I remember
the carbon GT deck.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was a total Frankenstein. Actually, it looked pretty good to be honest, and we've still got it hanging around somewhere at the other shop. And but I still remember then we were all testing it, and it had the old GT remote too. It was one of the small little triggers, so it was really, really sensitive. And oh my god, we had a bit of fun with it, but we were pretty scared to ride, especially with the braking. The acceleration was just insane. But yeah, we only had some fun just playing around purely with that part of it. But yeah, we've got a few others. We got the big ones that we took to the UK Open and
12,000 watt monsters. So we all have access. There's a couple of them down at the shed there. When was the last time you rode it?
Oh man, not for ages.
This year?
I've got one at home. No, I haven't ridden it this year.
This year?
No,
I haven't ridden it this year either.
I haven't ridden one for probably at least 6 to 12 months, and it was just for a bit of fun. And
oh no, sorry, I did ride one, and we took it to the go-kart event, and I was riding around the go-kart event, did a few laps on that, but no, it wasn't. I didn't really enjoy it.
I always found, I mean, like I'm a bit on with Jeff here. It's a bit of a loaded question because like, when we first built the 6 for the UK Open, and I was taking them home and testing and everything like that, and I would say, well, because I had, we had them and we still have them, obviously, like you said, and it was never my go-to. If I had to go down to the shops, I took one of the four-wheel drive boards one day, and it was just too much effort. Like, getting down there, it was just such an aggressive board for going down to the shops. And like I said, I haven't ridden it for about 12 months. And
yeah, the extra noise, and you can feel the extra resistance, but the power is there. And it just gets up.
I always relate it to, there's a reason four-wheel drive vehicles have the two-wheel drive option, like when you convert into two-wheel drive. If you drive a four-wheel drive on the road, you typically go what they call tram lightning, where it doesn't really want to turn as much because your front wheels are losing traction as they're trying to drive around a corner at speed. And you kind of get a similar thing with the four-wheel drive boards. If you turn or carve hard at speed, because the front wheels are driving, they actually want to drift out a little bit and understeer. So I found fun deep carves were heaps more fun on a two-wheel drive.
Exactly, and that's what the boards are about.
Yeah.
We design these boards for the ride, for that endless wave, and just for that, being in the moment of just, snowboarding or surfing in the back of your mind. But you can't do that in the four-wheel drive on the roads at all. But on the grass, like I said, it's a complete different ride. It feels possibly more like snowboarding in a way, like you're going down off piste and you're navigating those different sort of terrain, and it's quite fun then.
Yeah, good fun in grass, and obviously an advantage in a race scenario where acceleration is quite important.
Yeah.
What about on a consumer level? There's other negatives to consider, like price. You're paying for an extra motor controller,
extra weight.
Extra weight.
There's a fair bit extra weight. You sacrifice range.
Dealing with range. When we ride those things on grass, what range do we reckon we get?
I mean, I think the most I got out of one of them, and this wasn't trying to drain it. This is trying to be like kind of conservative. I think I got about 10 or 12 Ks, but when we're riding them hard, I was like down around pretty low.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few different battery cells that we've used in these. And look, I think I've got around maybe 15, and that's just on short grass and just maintaining speed but not really just focusing on that, like that drift.
In that style of riding, you may as well be on a two-wheel drive.
Yeah, that's right. It still flows across the grass.
When you make it come alive and ride as the four-wheel drive should, it's
in the turn, and it's in the turn coming out of the corners and where it just grips. Whereas the two-wheel drive, you expect it to let go,
Yeah.
but on the four-wheel drive, it doesn't, and it just keeps driving you through, and that's the best fun. Yeah, so I think they definitely have their place, and too, I guess it comes down to what kind of rider you are and what you want. But from a consumer, like, yeah, what I like to do, no, I don't pick the four-wheel drive any day of the week.
I think for a lot of people looking at like that video we put up, it's good in theory, but in reality, it's maybe not what they think it's going to be. Yes, it's fun, but I think if you bought one, you'd be like, oh, okay. I'm not sure this is exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, but there's I guess it depends on the person as well and what you're really looking for. And, you know, if you are in a position where you can have a quiver of boards, you know, it's always good to have like a four-wheel drive just sitting there and for, you know, if you're in that particular mood, you want to go and do something different. So there's always a place for it as well. Yeah,
no, that's true. That's true. If you have multiple boards,
yeah,
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not my go-to.
So there's a myth. Sort of true, sort of not true.
The other issue too is like, you know, God, you've got way more electronics as well, and you know, there's more maintenance issues. So you just got more expense. And there's a few little downsides, but
Cool. Another one we see. People, when they're looking up, especially if they're looking at secondhand boards, there'll be GTs, GTXs, GTRs, and the question is still out there, what is the actual difference? A lot of people think the only difference is a new battery. Why is that a myth? What is different about the GTR than the GT series?
Well, for starters, the whole electric system is different, except for the motors. You know, the motors are pretty much still the same. You know, the 140 kVs and 1500 watt, but it's a whole new communication system. It's all Bluetooth now instead of Wi-Fi. It's a new PCB design, battery technology. You know, there's no wires in it, so it is a new battery, but it's not just a new battery cell. There's a lot more in depth to it than that. You know, there's no wires, brand new BMS. There's all new communication. The deck is different as well. You know, we've adjusted the deck. It's got forged trucks instead of castings, gravity castings. So there's a lot of difference.
The seals are a big one.
Yeah, you go.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously the seals are a massive difference between the GT and the GTR. All you got to look at is either in bamboo or carbon. They both have really well working weather seals in them. Not saying they're waterproof. but
you
yeah,
can say the GT was not at all waterproof.
Oh no, not at all.
It didn't really have any kind of protection sort of systems in it for that. But the GTR, we've put it through its paces to protect it as much as possible.
Yeah, the carbon's definitely more watertight than what the bamboo is, and we're pretty happy with you know, where that's at. And you can see it there; it's on the wall just behind us. It's a very clean setup, and it's a lot more organised than what the GT was. And the communication's a big one. Bluetooth from Wi-Fi too. It's just rock solid.
Oh, just to add on that one, I think it's also an easy indicator as soon as you get a rider who's come from a GT onto a GTR. They've all literally said the same, like, it feels different, or you can feel the difference. And I think that in itself kind of shows that it's more than just a battery that's made the board different. Like, everything about it comes together to create that whole total package that is the next step. Yeah,
and all new firmwares as well. You know, all the IP around that, everything is different from in the BMS firmware, the motor controller, remote. It's a lot. It's completely redesigned.
Cool. Moving on to riding. Lucid trucks are the best way to increase carvability.
Geez. Well, I don't believe that's the case. You know, I think if you don't have the right bushing set up and you have looser trucks and the bushings are too soft, then it's a terrible ride. For me personally, it'll feel sloppy. I like to have my trucks slightly on the stiffer side. I do like that little sort of spring back when I come out of turns, and I like to work my my deep sort of heel side and toe side turns. So for me personally, I don't like it loose. But it definitely comes down to how heavy you are and what is your bushing setup. What is the durometer that's in those bushings? I want to know, what do you guys reckon?
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I mean, I've ridden boards of other riders who have loosened their trucks right back. I'm not going to say who they are, but they know who they are. And look, I've got to say, like the ones where they were really loosened, the board kind of wanted to like fall into a lean, and there was no actual feedback, and I found it, like you said, sloppy.
Yeah.
And you actually feel like you lose a bit of control of the carve because the board kind of just falls in and out of it with no feedback before it starts reacting. And definitely agree. I mean, the bushing choice is a much bigger factor than just loosening your trucks. And like, if you look at my board, for instance, like I'm a light rider, and a lot of people just presume that I run really loose bushings or loose trucks, and I don't. I've just got softer bushings in it. The nut tension's all the same. The trucks just loose feel normal, with no weight on them. But like the way it rides, it's smoother lean in and out. And it's just more so the bushings are set for my weight rather than trucks actually being loose.
I think there's a lot of people out there who don't really understand, how to tinker with that ride, with the trucks and the bushing setup. And like literally you can transform your whole ride by just swapping something out or tightening something or loosening something, either way. And tinkering and getting that right set up just for you is crucial. Like you're going from, you're looking for that endless wave feeling, you've got to have that right set up. But then again, if you want to go fast, you probably want them a little bit more stable and tighter. So that's when you can, use harder bushings and tighten them up. And we often see a lot of people when we get boards through here in our service department. It's always interesting riding on other people's boards and how they have their boards set up.
100%. And we do see that quite regularly. Some like opposite ends of the scale where we've got nuts that are nearly off the thread and there's like no actual pressure on the bushings, to ones where the bushings are like completely flattened and bellowed out.
And they just simply do not turn. You could probably ride 100k an hour and they'd still be stable as.
It's just dead straight. And that's like a clear indication of when somebody needs to consider bushings rather than just, turning the nut on the kingpin.
Yeah, well, you said that the other day. It doesn't really matter what weight you are. The nut tension should sort of be similar, and it should be the bushings that change.
Correct. I mean, the nut position and tension on the bushing should always be pretty similar, give or take a little bit of adjustment. And your bushing durometer is probably what should be addressed more so than just cranking down on the kingpin adjustment.
For me, I like to have my barrels and cones that are closest to the deck slightly harder than the ones that are closer to the road. And then I like to more so have the bushings nut closer to the road, softer. So you initially get that looseness, but then when you want to go into the double kingpin and you hit the other, the barrel, that's when you get that little bit more stability. So it doesn't then just sort of slop out from there. And I think that, tinkering is the way to go.
Yeah, just keep playing with it. I like running mine quite hard, and I'm heavy. So if a normal person gets on my board, it feels awful. But when I like to carve, I'm trying to get off axis with the board. I really want to lean over to make the thing carve. So as it stands, it's super, super stiff, and you really have to work it into the carve.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at all three of us, you're the lightest, I'm in between, and you're the heaviest. And if each of us rode each other's boards, we'd probably want to change it slightly.
100%. I've ridden Matt's board plenty of times, and I mean, we're looking at a 40 kilo difference in rider weight, and I mean, and even your board as well. Like I get on it, and I definitely can't carve it the same way I do.
Yeah.
And if you look at the nut settings, they're all very similar. Yeah. The bushings are all very different.
Actually, it's quite funny. You just reminded me then, CJ in the Rizzy community.
That's definitely not who he was talking about before.
No, I was talking about Lee. Lee, if you're listening.
or Roscoe too.
Yeah. Well, Lee lost a nut because he used to run them so loose. The nut came off and he didn't know.
Yeah, I know. CJ stepped on my board a couple of times and he straight away looks at me and goes, "These are so bloody tight. How do you ride like this?" And I was like, well, that's just how I like to ride. I can still get into my deep calves, but then again, he's a different rider, different style, and still hooks in.
So the last myth is wheel chunking equals bad wheel. Why would a wheel chunk?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. Is how soft the wheel urethane is, like what durometer. Harder the durometer, less chance it's going to chunk. It's also the shape of the edges of the wheels itself. You know, does it have a sharp lip or does it have more of a narrow sort of rounded lip? So these are key factors in the wheel design itself and the construction. But then again, it's also what surface you're riding on. If you're riding on a, you know, like a shitty chunked up road that's got, you know, exposed ag all over the place, then you're definitely going to come across rocks that are stuck up. But if you're on a nice car park or smooth footpath, got far less chance of chunking anything. At the end of the day, we've seen every wheel chunk, no matter what brand it is. You know, we're not going to name all the brands, but it's just a common thing. All wheels will chunk. I think the softness has a big thing to do with it. The softer it is, the easier it's going to chunk.
100%. And like, you know, the softer the wheel is, as well as like the larger it is. So like if you're talking a large diameter wheel with the same size inner core, it's got a lot of urethane that can flex. So all it takes is like a little bit of a cut from a piece of glass or a rock in the road, and then it's got so much urethane that as it's flexing, that cut just keeps expanding and just ends up splitting and chunking off. And you'll find that bigger urethane wheels will always typically get larger chunks for that reason. And it's not to say they're a poorly made wheel. It's just they're more susceptible to it.
And then, you know, ways around that is just make them harder.
Yeah,
you know,
and then you start losing some of that sort of benefit of having that softer big wheel.
100%.
Which, if we look at the Stoke, it comes with a choice of soft, medium, or hard wheels in the Caguamas. Yeah. And that's the perfect example. The soft wheels are the smoothest, bit floaty.
Yeah, nicest to carve on. Beautiful.
The hard wheels are the hardest. They're going to be the roughest ride. And they're the ones that aren't going to chunk as likely as the softer ones. So it's going to be a trade-off no matter which way you go. And also a lot of these wheels are designed for skateboards. So when you put them into an eSKATE scenario, you know, they're going 40 kilometers an hour for 20 kilometers at a time. It's a tall ask, especially if you're riding hundreds and hundreds of kilometers.
Definitely. And you just don't achieve that when you're on a normal longboard. You know, you just push it around your street and you're only doing like 10, 15K an hour max, and you don't do anywhere near the distance what an eSKATE does.
Yeah, I think the drive force as well has something to do with it, especially when people start sliding it in that drive force while you're going to deep carves, because you've got like, you know, two different directions of load going into that urethane. Like you said, you don't normally get with normal skating, and that's going to have a big effect on them as well. So it is a lot to ask from what would typically be a normal skate wheel when you start putting drive into it.
Yeah, I think also like, you know, if your wheels do chunk, you can still ride them. It just depends on how bad it is.
That's actually a question that comes in quite a lot. Hey, my wheels are chunked. People don't know if they can keep riding it or not. They try and buy a replacement single wheel, stuff like that, for something that's not really an issue.
Yeah, depending how bad it is, you know, if there's
tiny one,
little tiny ones you can get away with, and you know, if there's like cuts in the wheel, it's fine. It's part of it. But if there's a decent sized chunk, and you probably don't want to see that hanging out in the side of your board.
Yeah, I mean, typically, like, you know, we get people asking that question all the time. Like, you hear it quite regularly when, you know, they might get like a fingernail-sized chunk, or like something's come off, and oh, should I keep riding? And you know, that's not going to cause any issues. But as Jeff said, like, you know, if you start getting like, you know, big chunks at the size of like 20 and 50 cent coins and stuff, then you probably want to start considering replacing the wheel.
Yeah. And it's so good too. Like, I know it's in the longboard industry, you know, it's like a rite of passage. How much can you wear your wheel down, you know?
That's what I was going to say. So environmental factors in terms of how rough the surfaces are play a massive part, because I've seen a lot of wheels chunk out when they're pretty much brand new, but that exact same wheel I've seen, like Aaron from the UK.
Yeah.
Him, for example, he's taken the 85 mil Caguamas to the point where there's 2 or 3 mil of urethane. They've gone down to 52 mil, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'll put up a photo of it because it is insane. And he hasn't chunked them at all. He's worn the whole thing down over months and months and months of sliding.
Yeah.
It's the same wheel, different environment.
Yep.
So just because it chunks in one scenario doesn't necessarily mean it's poorly made or anything like that.
Yeah, and Aaron's a really good rider. He knows how to control the board and on what surface is the best to slide the board. So he's probably got it. He's probably got that wheel dialed in exactly where he knows when that release is going to be, and it's just suits him to a T. And why change them if they're worn in? Wheels get better with age, I reckon. Once they get that sort of shape and they start coning a little bit, then you can really sort of feel the give points and release points.
Yeah, no, 100% on that one.
Wicked. Let's call it there. This has been episode number 10. We're in the double digits now. So
Awesome.
For anyone watching,
Nice.
go hit the like button, give us that big thumbs up. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Happy days.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.